Hey everyone, my name is Kirsten Vanderjack. I'm the founder and CEO of the Normalize Money Project, which is a nonprofit financial literacy school, as well as Katie's House Foundation, which is a 501c3 nonprofit for housing, affordable housing. And so I want to thank you for purchasing this 12-hour shared housing class. Now, what's really great about this class is we're going to talk about so many things that have to do with running a shared house. We're going to talk about picking your population of people who you want to serve. And we're going to get into the nitty gritty of the business side of things. So, let me give you a full overview of what we're going to be going over in the next 12 hours. So, shared housing with one single family residence, you can make up to $100,000. That would be a 4 or 5 bedroom house. It could be a 4 bedroom with a finished garage or a fifth space. So, essentially, you would want to have 5 bedroom spaces to make $100,000 gross income. Now, we actually run live classes once in a while, but I'm probably not going to be doing those so much anymore because we're just too busy with all the things going on with the foundation. Excuse me. So, you are going to be part of our investor alliance, and we really appreciate that. We're also working on a funding alliance in the United States, and we're working on a placement alliance in the United States. And so, what that means is that we're busy trying to generate all of these networking contacts of social workers and police officers who place people into the various houses that, as investors, you and I have available to us. Also, we're trying to put together funding. So yes, of course, there's private money, there's hard money, there's traditional vanilla loans, but there's also plenty of grants. There's donations, there's nonprofits who specifically have a mission to raise money for special populations and then give that money to boots on the ground. So we are busy doing all of that. So we're not going to have any live classes moving forward that I have on the schedule, which is why it's really great that you have this class that you can refer back to. Please make sure that you read all of the documents that are attached to each one of these courses and that you become very comfortable using those, because that is largely what you paid for, is not just this video education, but the actual documents, which you can modify and then you can put on your own logo. And so that way you can run and operate your own housing foundation if you would like to. You know, as a nonprofit, we can help you get set up with an attorney if you want to do that. Or you can still run it as an LLC. However, there are definitely some differences. And so we'll talk about those later in the 12 hours about why would you have a nonprofit versus an LLC. So I had mentioned to you, that with 10 single beds in a 4 bedroom, 2 bath with a den or like a formal dining space that you could close off with, a wooden divider, if you would, you can make $8,500 per month, depending on the market that you're in. Now, I don't know what your mortgage payment is, but once you deduct that and you deduct some other expenses, you should have a pretty healthy net income when compared to some of the other options. For a long-term rental, certainly you can make a lot more than a long-term rental. And I'm not sure if you're into Airbnbs and what you're actually grossing and netting, but you want to look at that. So this should be much more lucrative. It is also higher risk, and getting government contracts does take longer. We're hoping, the more investors that get involved and start offering shared housing, then hopefully this alliance will grow faster throughout the United States, and getting people into the houses and the funding won't take so long. So in looking at who needs shared housing, There are veterans, there's aged out foster adults, there's domestic violence victims, human trafficking victims, people exiting a hospital stay, which is called hospital to housing. Uh, there are people who need to stay next to a hospital so that way they can go in for treatment, or maybe their loved one needs a place to stay. Now, I will tell you that at Katie's House Foundation, our beds that are available are half of what a hotel is. And so for people who can't afford a hotel or an Airbnb, it's really hard for them to stay with their loved ones who have to have, let's say, cancer treatment or surgery and then visit them, right? And so that's why it's really impossible or really great to have these types of possibilities. So, okay, people exiting the justice system. So they're coming out of drug court or jail. People exiting homelessness or living in their cars. People looking for sober living after leaving detox. People who can't afford or qualify for an apartment, hotel, or Airbnb, and then college students. Now, I'm sure that you can think of additional people, like even elderly who are on fixed income. That's a huge population of people who their rents are going up and inflation with the cost of food. And they have not seen a 13% increase in their cost of living stipend from the government. So normally that's about 3% a year. And so they are getting behind. And in the case of property taxes, some of them are actually losing their houses that are completely paid off to tax sale. And coming out of COVID-19, right, there are a lot of people who mentally it's been hard if they've been cooped in their house or if they've lost their jobs. And so there's really just a lot of people who are going to need help also when the foreclosures come through the bottleneck. And my personal background is in investing, and also professionally as a mortgage underwriter for close to 20 years. And so in looking at what's happening at the banks and also in talking with my attorney who handles foreclosures in the state of Arizona and Alabama and handles some of my land, writing mortgage notes, originating private mortgage notes, and talking about what's coming down the funnel, there's supposed to be a lot of foreclosures coming down the funnel once they work their way through that bottleneck. And so that means, a lot of people who have been living somewhere are, in addition to the current crisis of homelessness, there's going to be more of them. And so renting back those houses to those individuals that unfortunately they can't afford or they can't manage their finances. I really feel compelled that as investors, we do need to step in some capacity and make it affordable for them. But also what's really great about shared housing is the companionship. And so when I was referencing COVID-19 and people being lonely, companionship in shared housing is actually really great for, of course, elderly, for students, for veterans, for a lot of people that really just want to talk with somebody. And if it's in the case of sober living, there's some accountability there because they can't use, let's say heroin, if they have a roommate right next to them. And so normally these rooms are 10 by 10, and the National Alliance of Recovery Residences says that you can have a single bed and a person in a space that's 5 by 10. So if you have a room that's 10 by 10, then you'd put in 2 single beds and 2 dressers or nightstands and dressers. So these are the people who need shared housing. Now, this is actually a video. When we started with sober living, this was our house manager. So I'm going to let this video play through and you can meet Hunter.
Hey, my name is Hunter. I'm a resident and house lead here at Katie's house. Um, just kind of wanted to share some of my experience so you can learn a little bit about me and a little bit about this program. Basically, I kind of went to like a detox facility and got out of there, and I figured, okay, like everything's out of my system. You know, now I'll be good. I won't go through withdrawals or anything like that. So I don't need anything. Um, and boom, next thing I know, I'm in a detox facility again. And I'm like, what? How did this happen? It's out of my system. And then sober living gets mentioned to me, right? Like this aftercare or type system. And for some reason, I just got to this place where I was kind of beat down, and I was really willing to listen to somebody else for once. And it was the best decision I ever made, because what I didn't know was that the drugs, the alcohol, the codependency, all that was like the solution for my problems. Like all that was my answer because the real problem was like in here. It was something much deeper, and I had no idea about that. But I got into sober living. I got into a place, and I saw a bunch of people who were dealing with the same thing, and their solution was also alcohol or drugs, but they didn't have to do that anymore. I was like, how do you do this? And they showed me, the same way they did it. But also, it gave me a lot more than that. It gave me people to go through this process together with. It gave me lifelong friends that I'll never forget, that I talk to on a regular basis, and that we're bettering our lives together today. And it's a much bigger deal than it started off at, because before recovery, before Katie's house, before all these things, there was no purpose. There was no meaning to my life. It just seemed like I couldn't get things together. I couldn't keep them together. And today it's not like that. For a long time, I wanted these relationships with my family. I wanted to be like a good boyfriend. I wanted to be a good employee. And today I have all three of those things. And I tried to do it for so long and so long and so long on my own, but I never could. Um, and every time I'd get more down on myself. What's wrong with you? You're better than this. You can do this. Um, but I just didn't have the answer. And I finally had to admit that and find somebody else who did. And that's what, like, sober living and these programs have given me is, the answer. And it's given me to like relationships with people who also have that answer. And I would not be the man standing in front of you today without that at all. And I owe my life to this thing, and today I have the opportunity for guys to come in to help them along that same path while they also help me. And I couldn't be more grateful for that. But all of this has been this massive shift in perspective that's only been caused by me first taking that step and getting into a place like this, and to getting to know the guys I did, and to be honest with them, and to be vulnerable, and to throw away a lot of old ideas, and to make sacrifices to better my life, and to have a relationship with my family again, and to have a job, have money again, things I was not accustomed to in the past. Um, and this has just been my experience thus far. I'm looking forward to much more time doing this. And thank you for listening to me. That's all I got.
All right, so that was Hunter. He still lives in one of the houses under management with Katie's House Foundation. And so we appreciate Hunter for taking the time to share that information with us. Now, we are going to talk more about house presidents, house managers, house leads, backups, and basically how you keep a pulse on the different types of houses. Also, sober living is the most advanced in my personal belief of having a standard home and trying to help people stay sober. The house rules around that, there are considerably more house rules that need to be put in place for structure. And so the cost around that can be a lot more. And so looking at the Excel spreadsheet, which we're going to go over a little bit later not this class, but we'll probably do it in the next class. it's really important for you guys to take the time to use that Excel spreadsheet and look at the costs that are associated with running one of these types of houses. Now, if you want to be a housing provider that's just providing the housing and having an outside nonprofit or outside government um, entities doing what they do, you can, of course, partner with them as far as just knowing what they provide and providing that information to the residents who live inside the house. And so there are different levels of care when it comes to sober living and other types of assisted living, or there's a lot of different kinds of things to consider. And it just depends on how complicated you want to make it. And then, of course, making sure that you are charging appropriately and that the market will yield that for you. So, me personally, looking here, I'm a 20-year financial analyst. When we look at arbitraging a rental, you could make as much as 93% cash on cash. Excuse me. And a debt coverage ratio of about 2 times, and a cap rate of 31%. Again, that's arbitrage. And, it may take you a little bit of time to get your property performing to that capacity. And it depends on what market you're in. So geographically, it's important to have this 5 living spaces, in my opinion. If you have 4 and you have 8 beds, then you're going to be tighter, of course. If you have 3 bedrooms, I don't even recommend it, really. Eventually we will get to a point where we would like to have 10 houses, through our investor network, where let's say that they're 3 bedroom, 1 bath, or 3 bedroom, 2 bath, and they're solely dedicated for human trafficking. And we have a nonprofit who may be able to fund all of the beds. And so the people would be able to come and go, and all of the funding would be taken care of. And again, if those contracts are put together properly, then a 3 bedroom could work, or even a 2 bedroom, or even a 1 bedroom. But when you're first starting out, if you can, it really depends on your mortgage payment and your overhead and how complicated your operation is going to be. And so I would just recommend that you have, at least 4 bedrooms. Okay. So throughout this next, 11 and a half hours, essentially, I'm going to share with you all kinds of things that I have learned over the last 20 years. And for $1,500 that you paid, you're going to get so much more out of that if you will please just put aside everything else, put your phone on do not disturb. Hopefully you have a second line for emergencies. And then that way you don't have all this incoming information while you're trying to take this 12 hours of classroom training, because a lot of times I know that we pay for these classes and then life is so busy that we don't really invest enough into them. And I would like to ask you to please do that during this 12 hours. That way you get your $1,500 worth, which I'm sure you will. With the documents alone, you will. And so we're going to cover, of course, how to take a single family and convert it into a shared house. We like to call them boutique shelters. What are some of the policies and procedures that go with a shared house? What is the nonprofit advantage? We'll read over a government grant and we'll discuss an MOU, which stands for a Memorandum of Understanding. We'll cover where you can obtain funding, or where we obtain funding for our first shared house in less than 60 days from a traditional lender with a 10-minute application. We'll review, some brokers who offer liability insurance for this particular real estate space throughout the United States. We need to make sense of your objective. And so making sure that your website actually says what you want it to say and that it's not conflicting information or it's not too muddy. Because if it's muddy, then your insurance broker or underwriter who asks for your website, they won't really understand and you'll get a really high premium. I mean, I've seen or heard of other people getting as high premiums quoted as $20,000 a year, but more often than not, they're just declined because they weren't clear on who they were going to serve. So the underwriter just didn't know what the operation was. And so we'll talk about how we at Katie's House attract, hire, and train a house manager. We'll also talk about, again, the different populations, how to go about advertising to those populations, how to screen them, and then how to intake them. And then who you need on your team, essentially, in order to make this operation run. So that way you're not actually running the operation. And then what do you want to name your nonprofit, right? You got to think about that if you want to have a nonprofit. And so some of the business stuff that's really important to running this new business, essentially. If you can cash flow, let's call it just $1,000 on every single family net, and you can put together 10 houses over the course of the next several months or several years, you could have a really great passive income real estate portfolio that serves a really great purpose long term, not Airbnb up and down with all of the policies around that. But people who are coming out of high school that need a place to go in your community, and they can only afford a room to rent. But how do you take their application? How do you screen them to make sure and do it quickly? And actually, you shouldn't even be the one doing this. Your property manager should be doing this. But again, your property manager needs to know, what is this? Is it just a regular house? And if that's the case, are there some beds in it? Is there an exit sign that glows in the dark? Some of these kinds of features. If it's sober living, do you have Narcan kits under the sink? What are the codes around these things? How many people can you have in a house? Do you need an inspection from a local government agency? So there's just like anything that you're getting into. First, let's just start here with this class today and start getting some ideas on paper. And you have access to houses. Otherwise, you wouldn't have signed up for this class. And you must want to make a social impact because you signed up for this class. And so you also want to make a good amount of money, and you need to be able to find these grants or find the people and have them go through your application process to get that money moving. Now, we have to talk about the expenses because they are more, just like an Airbnb has cleaning fees and things like that. How much time does this take? It depends on how much time, how involved you want to be and how much money you want to net versus paying that stuff out to somebody like a property manager. Also, it depends on if you live in the area where your houses are. So again, geographically, there are certain places where you should have houses that make more sense. And then, of course, if the numbers make sense on creative financing and you can get something closer to you, and maybe geographically it wouldn't have made the most ideal sense with current market interest rates. But if you got the creative financing with a 3% 30-year fixed, again, every house and the mortgage is going to be different. If you own it, your insurance cost, your property manager cost, again, how involved do you want to be? So I don't know how much time it's going to take you, but you could be up and running in 60 days. It is kind of what I would say, depending on if you want to put together a new company or if you already have an existing company, and then defining what your operation is. Is it sober living, a level 1, a level 2, or is it more of what we have on our website at Katie's House Foundation? Let me actually share this with you guys. So If you look at Katie's House Foundation, you can see we have some house rules. We have a good neighbor policy. This is a light version of shared housing, in my opinion, so you can set that up faster. Going back to, shared housing and what we're going to cover, the net income, I always say start with the end in mind. So start with your net income in mind. And so this class is going to run on the analytical side, and I hope that you guys appreciate that. If anything, make sure you save the documents, and then when you're ready to take action, read through those, specify them for your own operation, unless you're going to subscribe to our model, whether you do it on your own or you get with us and we JV on something. But basically, make sure that you save these documents and that you do tune in. I may share some stories, of course, but a lot of this is going to be the business side. So the shared housing cash flow calculator, our weekly rents calculator. We're going to go over an Excel spreadsheet with all the housing items that you would buy. A lease if you wanted to arbitrage from someone else. You can get a refinance even in the name of a nonprofit. So if a nonprofit rents the house, then you can take that. We know a loan officer who would refinance that. Of course, there are other types of loans, debt service loans and things like that. And then we have over 20 pages of policies and procedures that we created using the most recent standards set by the National Alliance of Recovery Residences. And so this is all proprietary information to us based on the state of Alabama and based on our insurance, which is in Alabama. And looking at the National Alliances of Recovery Residences version 3.0 guideline book, which you can just Google NAR, N-A-R-R, standards 3.0, and it'll come up. You can take NAR classes too. So if you're into the sober living and you want to get NAR certified, or if you want to see really the most excellent standards, in my opinion, and kind of, you can change some of that if you're not going to get NAR certified, or if you're not going to do sober living. But certainly you want to have the basis or the foundation to kind of pull from. Like the questions that they ask you will make you think, okay, how do I want to handle loitering on the property? Because if you have a couple people, or let's say you have 6 people and they're all standing out in front smoking cigarettes, the neighbors, what's the good neighbor policy around that? How about parking? What's the good neighbor policy around parking? Is it unlimited street parking like it should be? So these are some of the kinds of things that get prompted in that guidebook. Okay, so I want to talk about the 5 truths of shared housing. So this is actually from endhomelessness.org. And so they go over here that shared housing is not a lesser option, right? Living with other people, especially when transitioning out of homelessness, has extraordinary social, mental, and emotional benefits. It also is more affordable. So we know that, especially with utilities. Utilities are so expensive these days. Excuse me. Shared housing is flexible because there are many ways, multiple options that people can share housing through formal or informal arrangements. It doesn't have to be sharing a simple apartment with a roommate. It can be adapted to fit different demographics. Shared housing is totally worth it financially for people experiencing homelessness and the homelessness system. So we know that there is an affordable housing shortage nationwide. So we have to increase the density. Shared housing can maximize quality of life. since shared housing makes housing more affordable for each person in a unit, tenants may be able to rent units in neighborhoods that otherwise may not be affordable to them. This proximity provides access to better schools, amenities, job opportunities, and transportation, among other benefits. So this is really important when we talk about environment and people who have only ever lived in an environment, whether that was inside of the house and or outside of the house, on their block or in their community. And they didn't have access to the best schools, right? Or even they might be in a food desert because they don't have grocery stores because they're shot up on the block. So they, are living in a war zone. And if you take that person and you stick them in a B-class neighborhood, their environment will change radically. We see this with people who come into a lot of money. But the thing also, when you're in shared housing, that's a little bit different than just coming into money in a new house, is that you have other people in the house who are also changing their lives. And so you have a house manager or a house president who keeps a pulse on things. You have a house security system. So that way people coming and going are the only people that are supposed to live there, and people's things are not being stolen. And so these kinds of expectations and amenities, and having, a dishwasher to sanitize your dishes, having 2 refrigerators that are working, having a nice washer and dryer, these types of things, having a yard, right, where you can have a bonfire. Maybe somebody has never had a yard before that they could mow, or just even the space to go out on their backyard because they've always lived in a place where the environment was not conducive to that. So it changes the way that they perceive the world, and then they can change their life. So I love that. Shared housing doesn't have to be forever, right? So in our model, it's as little as a week, or you can really stay as long as you like. But we do recommend the length of stay between 6 months and 2 years. So, like all living situations, shared housing does not have to be a rest of your life option. It can serve different purposes for different people. Could be in between, like, even for Hunter, he actually does own a house. It's being renovated. So if he wanted to, and certainly I'm sure he will, move out whenever he would like to. So it's not really just for homeless people, or even just for people who are experiencing some kind of transition in their life. So it could be someone's preferred way to live. So that's just something to keep in mind when we talk about transitional housing or halfway housing or affordable housing, right? Don't always think, and I hope the populations will get used to the fact that, it's not the people, well, it might be people who are recovering from drugs or homelessness, but it's everyone in between as well. So in jumping back into a few different things, we're about 30 minutes through the first episode. And I do want to bring up our house rules, good neighbor policy, and then also my personal background, and our mission, our vision, our FAQs, our website, and things like that. So I'm going to actually bring up Katie's House Foundation. And then I'm going to show you what a shared house actually looks like. So this is our homepage. And if you were interested in purchasing the code to use our same website, I would be agreeable to sell you that code for probably $1,000 if you want that template. So just let me know. And essentially, Katie's House Foundation is a nonprofit 501c3 that offers beautiful shared housing to combat housing insecurities and would-be homelessness. Our shelter and lease programs provide affordable shared housing and easy qualification for those just starting out, starting over, or on a fixed income. And so they can apply on our website. So we have our housing application built into the website. And our insurance does not allow for anyone with violent crimes, sexual misconduct, arson, or housing as a condition of parole. And so we actually screen for these kinds of things, either through a formal background check, which we charge $41.99 for that. And then we order that through, a recommendation from our insurance company. Takes a couple days. Sometimes it's 24 hours to get that back. Or if we're working with, let's say, a probation officer or someone who can vouch for their background, then if they don't have any known history of those things, then that would be a third party that would give us a background on them. Now, our qualifications at Katie's House Foundation is that they have a valid photo ID. They have 30 days pay stubs or verification of income to cover 1 times their rent. So if they're paying $125 per week, and then they're paying $75 on the first of every month toward their utility share, then that would be essentially $525 for the bed. Might be a single occupancy room, it might be a double occupancy room. And then they would pay $75 a month. So that's $600 that they would need to verify if they're a private payer to stay with one of our houses. And then there's that background check that I said that they have to pay for up front. There's no credit check. So a lot of people get denied because they don't have a 700 credit score or a 680 or a 620, whatever the property manager says. And so that's another reason that people are homeless. What can they do if they've never had financial literacy education and they don't know how to open a credit card or a few credit cards under the proper name, proper date of birth, proper social, proper address, and then have a credit report that pulls that payment information in and gives them a good credit score. Really need to have the financial literacy education. You might notice that my shirt actually says K-Money. This is because Julie, who is a committee member here and does government placements for us at Katie's House Foundation, she and I teach a financial literacy course geared towards teenagers. And we do a YouTube channel, a show actually for teenagers and at-risk adults to teach them the financial literacy. And so K-Money is, something that they call me since I was in banking for 20 years as an underwriter or with different companies always having to deal with real estate and money. But anyhow, this is so important that people learn financial literacy. And that's one of our tenets at Katie's House Foundation, of course, is that they also go through that paid course at $600. And then they will have a credit score, or at least they can know what their score, their credit looks like, make sure it's accurate, and then get a permanent lease or buy a house when they leave. We would hope that they stay 6 months or up to 2 years. So that way they can have 2 years on the job and 2 years worth of credit and 2 years of savings. And also just a really nice, comfortable, beautiful house that they otherwise could not have afforded without roommates. So this is a long-term solution at Katie's House Foundation to help people buy their own piece of earth in their own starter house, again, through our investor network. So that will be really great when we start seeing, people embracing that. We already have some people who are just chomping at the bit. They normally want to have their own houses, and so they want to be trained in taking this class as well as the financial literacy. So we're going to make huge impacts through Katie's House Foundation and people like yourself. It's just going to take time, right? It takes time. So anyhow, here is our application, and you guys are welcome to use this as a template. And then there's an authorization here. Going back up, so we do actually ask them right away if they agree to follow the house rules and good neighbor policy. Here are our house rules. And so I will go over these more in depth later on. But there's things that we're going to need to talk about, like what happens if the police get called, right? Especially in the case of sober living, depending on how recently they came out of using a particular drug or alcohol. And so if they relapse, which lots of people do relapse, I'm a fan of medically assisted treatment because the chemistry around that. Um, it medically assisted treatment, they say that it improves their ability to not relapse. But back to police and people vacating the house, what happens if the police do get called? I mean, one, you should be able to show them your insurance policy that you are a nonprofit housing provider, a shelter, a social services type of home, and you don't have a lease with that person, right? It's not a landlord and tenant relationship. It is something else. And so if they need to be removed from the property, the police can remove them to detox or to jail or to another homeless shelter, and they have to pack up their belongings. Now, we of course always want to be compassionate towards people. However, if somebody is completely belligerent, they are a health and safety risk to everyone else. And so this is important during our 12 hours to discuss this, and it's important for you to address it in your house rules and to enforce it as necessary. I'm not aware of anyone having to enforce this, and we haven't had to yet, because people that have relapsed have been giving a 3-day notice. We give them a 3-day courtesy notice instead of just kicking them out, which a lot of other sober houses have a habit of doing. And so we have seen people just leave. Now, there are some cases where people leave and they don't come back for a couple weeks. And so they skip curfew. And then what do you do with their stuff? Maybe they're even still paying you. Maybe they're not paying you. You need to have a move out rule. What do you do with their stuff? And so also about refunds and things like that. We'll get more into this in the 12 hours. The good neighbor policy is really important here. We will go over this more in detail as well. And so I want to show you a little bit about my background, or tell you my personal story, along with our mission, our vision, and our FAQs. So writing out your mission, your vision, and your FAQs is really important. Katie's House Foundation is on a mission to provide beautiful shared housing to people who are just starting out, starting over, or on a fixed income. We are committed to rapid housing for those with no credit, bad credit, low income, or looking to save money. For those with no known violent crimes, sexual misconduct, arson, or housing as a condition of parole. In addition to providing safe, affordable housing in a nice neighborhood, Katie's House Foundation is devoted to providing structured financial literacy modules so that each resident may gain the knowledge, confidence, and roommates, because a lot of times they're going to have to pair off to afford a house, necessary to lease or purchase their own home within 6 to 24 months, thereby combating housing insecurities and potential for homelessness in the future, right? So we're breaking the cycle. Our core values, of course, are integrity, accountability, speed, communication, safety, and excellence. You'll have to pick your own. What are your core values that you want your property manager and everyone to uphold? So Katie's House Foundation continually strives to add houses in new locations throughout the United States via our investor alliance, which is yourself. As we are not case managers, Katie's House Foundation appreciates the social workers and support provided directly to the residents from local businesses, nonprofits, and government agencies in the communities where our boutique shelters are located. So this just gives you an idea overall, right? FAQs, our bed rent ranges from $600 to $1,500 per month. So somewhere like San Diego, California, every bed, 2 beds in a room, could cost the contract, whoever wants to or needs to pay that contract, $1,500 per month. Now, really quick, we're going to just run a few numbers. So $1,500 per month for one person, renting a room if it's single occupancy because it's less than 10 by 10, or if you have two beds in there because it's a 12 by 12 room or a 10 by 11 room, then you could have double occupancy. So you could put a mother and her child in there. You could put a husband and a wife, things like that, right? And so $1,500 over 12 months, you're looking at $18,000 for one person. One thing that I want to talk to you about as it relates to sober living, if a person was coming out of a 21-day detox program and their parents paid for them to go there, or someone who, loved them handled that, or if they got a grant for it, or if they came out of court, they were in jail for a year for something, they may or may not even have a felony, or maybe they have 3 DUIs, but it's not a violent offense, but they've been in jail for 1 year, let's say. And let's say they do have a felony for having 3 DUIs and they're determined to get sober, but they don't have anywhere to go. And so in some cases, their probation officer will put them into a sober living facility. And that's where the accountability and a house manager and different things come into play. And so if that person were instead, if the court pays $1,500 a month for that person to live in your facility, then they're not living on the street where it's highly likely that they're going to relapse and get another felony, and hopefully they don't kill somebody, drunk driving again, or stealing a car, or even lighting a fire to stay warm and then causing a wildfire. And so, I've read that I've been told it's $85,000 per year to have one person in jail versus $18,000 to pay for this, right? And so this is what we need to consider, and why a drug court would pay $1,500 per person and have 2 people living in a bedroom and then have a whole sober living house. So now there's family that will also pay for their family, of course. And so talking with detox facilities and then people leaving the detox facility and being transported directly to your sober living facility, I would recommend that you have a level 3 facility. In most cases with NAR, if you're looking at the NAR standards, so it's not with NAR, but looking at the NAR standards, that way, you have more controls in place. So if they're 6 months sober, you might want to do a level 2. If they're 1 year sober, then you could get away probably with a level 1. And so this is the kind of stuff that needs to be looked at on a granular level, or considered at least by you. So our vision is to see homelessness decrease and upward mobility increase, to empower individuals through safe sleep, exceptional housing, and community resources by providing beautiful homes shared by 3 to 10 like-minded people. Now, why would we ever have 3 people in a house? Well, as you're getting people in, you might only have 3 people. So, our 3-pronged approach is intended to greatly reduce homelessness and implement our vision. And so our 3-pronged approach is having the funding from mission-aligned nonprofits, donations, and mission-aligned businesses, persons, government grants, contracts, private payers, that enables the cash flow. Our investor alliance, yourself, who paid for this class. So that way you can have a really great foundation to either go do this on your own, or if you want to work with us, you already know what you're stepping into. So essentially, right, an investor alliance of homes throughout the United States, almost like safe houses. Not that anyone's hiding them per se, but they are specified for social services purposes. And so they're converted from traditional rentals or Airbnbs, and they're either available to our network, or they're assigned to Katie's House Foundation and therefore made available for social services purposes to affiliate nonprofits, government agencies, and private payers. And then placement of at-risk persons, families, and their pets, right? So that's different, is that letting children into the houses under the supervision of their parents, letting them bring a pet. A lot of people who are homeless, they don't want to leave their dog. They love their dog. They'll take care of their dog. And, so I think that's really great that we do. Different houses have different rules. But essentially, we need placement professionals or Craigslist and people just to become aware that these houses, they are available. So we're going to quell housing insecurities and would-be homelessness. So this is our main page to show, government officials and placement specialists what we're all about. People can donate to us. Of course, they'll get a receipt as a 501c3 nonprofit. It's tax deductible. On our website, they can pay. Our tenants can pay. Well, we call them residents. And so my why do I do this? I do it because I lost both of my parents to drug and alcohol addiction and homelessness. I also lost both of my brothers. I recently heard from my younger brother, and hopefully I'll hear from him again. And so I've lost essentially all of my immediate family, being my parents and my two brothers, to drugs, alcohol, and homelessness, and even worse, that I won't get into. And so I was, living with my aunt for some time. And then I ended up living with my best friend, Katie. And lucky enough, her parents let me live there. So at their place, they had 8 people, normally in a 3 or 4 bedroom house. And so it was 2 people in a room, and it was great. So I personally have a vision for filling vacant homes with considerate people, because there are a lot of vacant homes that need to be rehabbed in the United States, or they've already been rehabbed and they're available for rent. And it's a matter of having, these affiliations and proper operations to help people so that way they can live in really nice housing. We don't need to build new housing, actually, because we do have houses that are available. Yes, with the rate of people moving here and moving around the United States, new housing and new builds do help. Tiny houses do help. There are a lot of different ways to go about putting together the housing piece of this, but certainly we already have houses that are available. And so on that note, I am going to show you, and I have taken another shared housing class. I recommend that you do take them. Sorry, side note there. And then this is one of my best friends. So this is not Katie. This is one of my best friends, Carrie. She and I have been working on getting into shared housing and, helping people since 2014. This is actually me and Katie, and this is why I call it Katie's House Foundation. What I wanted to show you really quick before we end this first session is what one of our shared houses looks like versus what an Airbnb might look like. So here we're looking at a 4-bedroom, 2-bath house. It's about 1,600 square feet. You can see that there's 2 single beds, a good sized closet. We have some shower caddies and individual safes that we like to purchase for sober living. This is the laundry area with new appliances. or at least, if they're used, they need to be in great condition. Nice large kitchen with a dishwasher and microwave and 2 refrigerators and lots of storage. Here's another bedroom. These bedrooms are about 11 by 13. And this is when we were just putting in the beds. And the nightstands, we finished up by putting in dressers as well. Now this house was recently rehabbed. And there's hand soap. So making sure that health and safety are the #1 priorities. So JJ will continue walking through to get a clear video. It's really great to have these videos for inventory purposes, for insurance, and for taxes. Now we have the hall closet right here, which is a maid's closet, and that stays locked. And then the other closet is unlocked and cleaning supplies in both closets. This is the mail corner. There's some whiteboards for things like the trash day and laundry days and things like that. Nice big dining space, living space. And then here's the 4th bedroom. Now in this room, we could fit 2 twin size beds because the room is larger than 10 by 10.
Narcan drug tests in these 2 boxes.
So these Narcan kits are worth over $100 each. And in a sober living facility, you would want to have those. Hey guys, I hope that you enjoyed watching that video of our shared house when we were just getting it started, just getting it set up. We will swing back around to what that house looked like when it was finished. And we will also go through a detailed Excel spreadsheet that my team put together. So that way you guys can look at all of those items. There's more than 100 things that we purchased for that particular house. And that will help you save a ton of time when you go to set up your house. So we're going to go ahead and wrap up this first class. And I do have some homework for you. Attached to this video, there are 4 documents. I would like you to read over my bio and think about your bio and why you are going down this path of shared housing. It's really important that people know what your why is, or that you can put something on your website because they do like to understand what motivates you in order to give you government grants or funding, or just to know that you're a really good person. So please be thinking about that. Also think about your mission, your vision, your FAQs, and then also there is a homework document, and basically it lists out some of the populations of people who need shared housing. And I'd like you to go ahead and write on there who you would like to house. If you had to pick just one population, who would it be? I look forward to seeing you in the next class, and I hope that you have a great day.